Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. I'm your host, Lucas McCann. Our guest today, Greg Melia, CEO of CXPA, the Customer Experience Professionals Association. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you, Lucas. Glad to be here.
My pleasure. As we kick it off, Greg, let's go back in time a little bit. I know you worked at the Chamber. I believe that was one of your early entries into the association marketplace. Tell us a little bit about how you found that place at the Chamber and how it's evolved to where you are today.
Yeah, it's kind of neat and interesting. If you think about the books that are behind me, a large majority of them are social anthropology. And when I got back from London and had this degree in social anthropology, people said, well, what type of job are you looking for? And how do you translate that into a career? And I said, well, what I'm really interested in is people coming together with a shared mission or vision. And that led me into government contracting. And government contracting has its ups and downs. And so when it had gotten to a point where there was too many downs, I decided that I was going to try to look for a government job. And go ahead and date myself. I saw a ad in the Washington Post newspaper for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Survey Center. Yeah, I'm that old. And I thought, wow, great, this will be a good government job. I'll do that for a little while, thinking that it was the Department of Commerce. So like many people, I found associations by accident, but I also was very fortunate to have the U.S. Chamber Institute program co-located with the Survey and Research Business Development Department. And so I got into Institute and started meeting all of these people who are running chambers of commerce and associations across the country. And that really just sort of spurred my thinking, how can I help more people launch and grow a career in associations and chambers and help other people do more through that vision, mission, connected organization structure.
Yeah. So then it sounds like you found a nice home that married up with what you really wanted to do. The idea that you stumbled into associations, I've had lots of guests that shared that sentiment. I think I'm like 2% of guests, either had somebody they knew or they married into it, or the rest of it is like you and I. We just found it by accident. But so from there, tell us about how you made the jump sort of out of the chamber and what that next move looked like.
Yeah. So, the Chamber Institute program is still one of the greatest developmental education programs people can look at. If you and I, Lucas, started the Chamber program together, we would spend a week taking classes for 4 years.
Wow.
And that builds such strong connections and such a strong foundation that then people usually go from there. And if you graduate from Institute, you typically go on to a leadership position. And oftentimes that leadership position involves earning your CAE. And so as I was working at Institute, people kept saying, you really should look at ASAE in the CAE program. Mm-hmm. And when that position became open, when John Graham had just come on board with ASAE, I was at God, I'm going to age myself a lot in this podcast. I was at a Tallahassee Society of Association Executives.
Judge-free podcast here, Greg.
Luncheon, yeah. And neither the Tallahassee Society or John are with us anymore, but I remember fondly that John was standing in front of this room and the association executives were asking, what's going on with the CAE program and what is next? And John was stating how important it was. And then they said, well, why is the merger between GWSAE and ASAE good for the association community?
Great question.
Keep in mind, I'm the only person in the room who is not from Tallahassee and not with ASAE or GWSAE. So I gave my opinion, and it really harkens back to September 11th, aging myself yet again, when both the Chamber and ASAE and GWSAE all put in resources on how to react to 9/11. Mm-hmm. And part of the question is can't we do more by collaborating, having one really high quality program with folks working together? And luckily, GWSAE, thanks to Reggie Henry's leadership, had a great website. And it was easy at that time to justify the merger just because ASAE folks would get access to this higher technology experience.
Yeah.
But like most things, you get into a new space. I came into ASAE running the CAE program, and then got the opportunity to work with the AMC Section Council, with the local, state, and regional societies, with membership, with volunteers, with the Next Gen Association Management Project, and ultimately ended my position at ASAE as the Chief Strategy Development, Membership and Chief Strategy Development Officer. So that was cool. A really good run. But
Yeah.
at the end of
at a
it,
really instrumental time. I mean, a lot of things were changing, taking shape. I mean, Collaborate is still
I,
as much of a nomenclature mission as it is a platform, a digital platform, right?
yeah.
It's very valuable.
I mean, I'm so proud of what we accomplished at ASA during the time, that I was there. I already mentioned the Next Gen program. We also brought together the AMC Institute and ASAE accreditations. We built out, sort of some really innovative things for small staff organizations. And then we were able to take that small staff membership and really flip ASAE's membership model so that it was selling to the organization as a whole, and allowing everybody on staff to have access to ASAE. So, when I look at that time, it was just a time when there was a lot of really good vision, a lot of really good teammates, and a really good opportunity to help ASAE grow and really meet the needs across the country and space. But everything has a opportunity when you hear things. And one of the things I got to do with ASAE was to go and speak at a conference in Berlin. And at that conference, I met some folks who were representing ITN, Independent Television News, out of London. And I had watched them during my graduate school days, and they had a very successful model working with associations to tell story through sponsored video. And it works great in the UK, works great throughout Europe and other parts of the world. Turns out doesn't work so well in the US for a variety of other reasons. But I learned a lot about video, and more importantly for me, I learned that I really like to work remote. And so it was that was something that wasn't possible with ASAE at that time. And it turns out it was a really strong set of skills for me to learn, not only to work remote, but to run a remote organization. I couldn't have had a better tee up for the pandemic.
Yeah, I was about to say, pretty fortuitous for what was to come in the next role. And you walked right into CXPA and then into a pandemic, and probably pretty well suited for that. You probably didn't know it, obviously. Nobody did. But again, tell us a little bit about stepping into that role and then bang, we're right into that
I think the biggest thing that I would give as advice to our listeners is always try to put yourself in a position to be successful, whatever comes next. I'll give you a small example. Our immediate past chair, as he was exiting the board, shared that he had never received a shirt from CXPA. And I thought, okay, we should get this man a shirt. He's just given the organization many years. And when we're ordering them, why don't we go ahead and order shirts not only for him, but for staff and the rest of our volunteer leaders? And that's where these purple shirts came about.
Yeah.
Little did we realize that 4 months later, all in-person meetings would be ceased, and that everybody was going to have a visual persona on Zoom for the next couple of years. And so just one small fortuitous space where it's like, okay, this is the right thing to do, and it pays dividends, down the road. But yeah, CXPA, it was interesting. The first time I saw the job posted, I didn't know what the term customer experience meant. And I thought that it was an association solely of contact center folks. And I thought, my gosh, I don't want to work just for contact center folks. I can't imagine that's a very fulfilling career. Luckily, I saw the post 2 more times and decided that I would read and learn a little bit more. And that's when, the light sort of went on that, in fact, customer experience ties together all of these things about vision and mission and systems theory and collaboration that are represented in the books behind me. And I'm like, you know what? this would be something that I'd be very interested in working on. And so that really led me to apply. And then in the interview stages, and this is another good lesson for our listeners who are thinking of moving up in that CEO search. The big question for the association was, should we hire a customer experience professional or should we hire an association professional? So you need to be able to articulate why, as an association professional, you have a unique background that will help you. And we all turn towards understanding 501c3 versus C6 and antitrust and bylaws. But the other thing that's really important is to recognize that as association leaders, we're each experts in helping to drive collaboration and drive collaboration in a way that brings together different people and values their viewpoints to create something that is bigger for the whole and for the industry than they'd be able to do on their own.
I think that's a great point. I mean, I've worked with personally over 1,000 associations, and as you do that, there's some turnover, right? People move and hop within the association industry. It's a big universe, but it's kind of a small world. And often I see the board wrestle with that decision. Do we promote somebody within industry? Do we bring in an association professional? And I can't advocate enough bringing in the association professional in almost all cases. And the reason is, I believe it's easier to come in and understand the industry and apply the principles of association management and leadership than it is the inverse. I mean,
I think that's a big part of it. I also think that you really articulated that well when you talked about, that it's a large world and a small community. That's generally the same for each of the professions as well. And one of the challenges is making sure that as a leader, you're not bringing in preconceived notions that come from your particular background or your particular space, but instead you're really looking to tap into the wisdom and to give everybody a fair shake to have their voice considered at the table. And so that's another thing that's been a really big part of my management career, is trying to design ways to build relationships with external organizations, or equally important, involve more people in the community in strategic planning and conversations. The board, and there are some very big boards out there. No matter how large your board is, it's always a subset of membership. And so how do we make sure that all of the voices in membership are considered and tapped into?
Yeah, the premise within the association communities, for better or worse, is sort of a rule and lead by committee. But if it's done right, it really works. And as you said, the board being made up of representation of members. I'm obviously, as a vendor in the industry, a big proponent of outside strategic planning, outside influence, value prop from different perspectives. And I think that community piece, the more community you have, regardless of the position, the better you will be equipped to lead whichever organization you're part of, because you have all these other people to lean on. I think back, right? That's the power of ASAE, is it's its own community within the community that is a trusted pool of both resources and colleagues to just sort of lean on in times of, COVID, certainly, right? Everybody was reaching out and talking, what's everybody doing? I often get into conversations with CEOs that reach back out and say, hey, what are other CEOs doing, or what are other associations doing in this industry? Because it can become easy to get really wrapped into your own membership. But again, the association professional that's been doing this for a while, I think, knows that it's a balance of staying in the industry, but not completely of it.
Yeah, I think that some of the words that you alluded to in there, and I'll use a lot of C words here, but not committee. I'm going to use community. I think that that's a huge part. I think that content is increasingly important. And then I think consensus is another word that I really would lean on. And that's where I think that, that's people find value in understanding how they connect to a broader community, how they connect to how others are thinking about a topic, and how they are masters of certain content and expertise. And so, those are three things that are on my mind. Committees, I think that one of the things we have to challenge ourselves is to always be reevaluating the best way to accomplish the work of the organization. And it's different than a for-profit organization, but
Oh, yeah.
sometimes, I'll give you an example. You and I were talking about how we're both from the Falls Church sort of area of Fairfax. I used to be on the vestry of one of the churches in the area. And very early on, they asked me if I wanted to be on the coffee committee. And I said, well, what do I need to do to be on the coffee committee? And they said, well, you just have to choose one Sunday of the month that you will show up and set up coffee and donuts for the parish. And I'm like, okay, that's not too bad, except my travel schedule and my family schedule, I didn't know what Sundays I'd be in. And so to me, I would rather see that ad hoc opportunity posted. And I don't need to be part of a committee because we don't need to make a group decision about the coffee and the donuts. So it's,
Very
I
serious
just want
stuff there. Yeah.
that's probably my own PTSD.
No, absolutely. Well, let's talk, switching gears, let's go a little bit deeper on CXPA. I mean, what is the story? I think the organization does not go back 50 years like some associations. What was the impetus for creating CXPA, and what's its, vision and mission been to date?
Yeah, I think what's great is that people, when they hear the word customer experience, they find it as something familiar and something that they know is sort of on the rise. If you went out to Google and you put in customer experience in quotes and hit search, you would get, I think the other day when I did it, I got 262 million results in less than a third of a second. And so that's good. People are using the term. They tend not to understand it. So you jump over to Wikipedia and it tells you that this article needs improvement. The reason for that is the term customer experience was first used in a marketing journal in the mid 90s. And it was talking about engineering the customer's experience. Customer experience is the perception that a customer has of an organization, that perception that is formed over time across all of the touch points with the technology, the people, and the interactions with the organization. Customer experience management is the process of trying to align your systems so that at each touch point, that's a positive impression. And so it's really important to recognize that the first customer experience offices within organizations were only established in the 2000s. So we're babies when we look at how far we are. But it's already helped organizations like Amazon and Zappos and others to Apple to grow. And to grow by focusing on what the customer really wants and needs, and using that to guide the decisions, rather than just looking at profitability or space on that side.
Yeah, when I hear customer experience, my knee-jerk reaction still tends to go to things that you talked about: brand, marketing, how a member experiences or feels a particular product or company. But you also said systems in there, and I'm glad you did too. Like, what does that look like, and how do you bring in people who can build the systems, not just have, I guess, say the marketing, right? It extends beyond marketing.
Yeah, and this is one of our challenges, is that customer experience does include customer service. It does include the analytics. It does include that frequent NPS question you get on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend? But when we really are talking about it, we're talking about the business discipline of thinking about the entire cycle from marketing and product design all the way through customer loyalty. And so it includes all those different pieces. Absolutely requires the right mix of people and technology and leadership in order to move forward. As a matter of fact, one of the coolest things about CXPA is prior to the pandemic, we were a young association who spent most of our time setting up informal happy hours where people exchanged ideas. This is what I'm doing. This is what worked for me. What worked for you? We gave out a series of innovation awards to try to inspire people and move them forward. All good things, but not necessarily ones that help to get to a regimented approach to CX as a business discipline. And so what happened during the pandemic is actually we had a member post on our version of Collaborate, another higher logic platform, that said, does anyone want to develop a playbook for customer experience in an organization? And by the end of the pandemic, we had
He's got it right here. Look.
yeah, 78 different
Wow.
authors from around the world who came together to help us write the first book of knowledge for our discipline. And that's
Is that
just
available
been,
for non-members? Not to get us off topic, Greg, because if it
it,
is,
it,
I
it
want
is.
a copy. I want to buy a
Yeah.
copy.
For
Send
those
me
who
the
are,
link, please.
are interested in the textbook, it's online at cxbookstore.com. But probably more importantly, if you join as a member, you get not only free online reading for it and the 13 other publications that we've since developed, but you also get access to a AI CXPA CX Knowledge Copilot that was written and developed by our members, and gives you answers off of the Book of Knowledge. So it's a very cool field to work in because we're talking about people who are working on the employee experience, who are working on culture, who are working on the human-centered design that goes into both products and services, measuring loyalty, looking at segmentation, looking at information, and then tying it all together with a cross-cutting orientation so that the organization is making those decisions and executing based on the customer. I'll give you a perfect example. I think probably one of our common friends, I think it's probably Jeff Cobb. And Jeff had a post on LinkedIn the other day, and he said that at MMCC, there was a lot of conversations about how close education and learning communities are becoming. And I think that's kind of correct, but it's also sort of missing the point. Associations have been making a problem for themselves by cutting things up into different departments. We need to flip that model and put the member at the center and ask, what does the member need? And then ask, how do our departments support that? So it's not, is this a learning program or is this a magazine article? It's what information does the member need and what's the best way to get that for them?
Yeah, and I feel like it reminds me of, Leadership 101. It starts with listening,
Yeah.
right? You have to understand what they need before you can offer up, what you have. I also saw something that came out of MMC and Tech, and somebody was posting about a new title. And, this conversation made me sort of, I'll say, link the two. And it was Director of Demand Generation, right? And you think, again, I thought that's a marketing position, and kind of it is. But when you read through the description, if you Google that, it's very much a customer experience director, manager, type of role where you're managing everything, starting with what do they need, all the way through and connecting to sales. I thought that was
It is. Demand generation, and we have a lot of folks in our field who work in demand generation. I think one of the challenges that I see is that demand generation tends to focus on its outcome as being the growth of movement through the funnel, and it less so on how the customer feels as they can move through the funnel. And so demand generation is sort of like the front end. Then you get handed off to customer success, and then you get handed off to customer support. What happens to your members' perception if those three pieces are not aligned? And
it's broken.
that's
Right.
Yep. And so there was somebody in our field who once said to me, "Oh, I am in charge of our customers' post-sale customer experience," and I just thought, how many of us have suffered because sales and marketing promised one thing and the product delivered something else? So you can't separate the customer's experience up. You need to think about that flow all the way through.
And I see it. I see people, breaking the chain, if you will, all the time, even at the association level, right? So, we come in, we'll help them develop a strategy and execute on new member development, and then there's a break in the chain as it relates to the onboarding, right? And then there's
Right.
a break in the chain as it relates to renewal. To what you said earlier, as if those are different parts of the experience, or it's different parts of being a member. It's all congruent, all needs to be thought of as more of a global strategy
Yeah.
to make sure that those, those points of handoff are as seamless as possible.
Yeah, it's really well stated. And I'll share with you two folks that I would recommend that people look at to better think about this and move forward. One is the Chief Experience Officer, Todd Unger from the American Medical Association. Todd wrote a book that's really easy and accessible for folks called the 10-Second Customer Journey. And what he really focuses on is really two things. One, how do we move people and make it easier for them to make a purchasing decision to get involved with your association? And then the second is, how can our staff make it easier for our members to be engaged in the association so that they can focus on giving their medical care? And so I thought that was a really great spot. And he just gave a great keynote for our conference that just happened.
Yeah.
2 years ago, our keynote for our conference, two conferences ago, it was just over a year ago, Megan Burns, who is a CX consultant out of Boston, she had a great phrase that I think solved one of the mistakes that we had. For those of you that have been around the ASA community for a while, you've probably heard Susan Sarfati's influence with surprise and delight. And surprise and delight is one element of customer experience. What Megan brought forward, and I think is just a great phrase for everyone to use, is to be consistently good and strategically amazing.
I like
And
that.
so just keep that in mind. You don't have to make every onboarding step a party, but you do have to make it work smoothly. And then you do have to choose the right moments to party.
Yeah, and I know associations struggle sometime from a budget perspective that say, oh, we're going to need to bring in this, really expensive consultant to come in just on this one aspect, and that's not really true. I like the consistently good. If you're consistently good, that's enough in most cases because you can wow them with your value prop. And speaking
Right.
of associations, and I know I don't have to make any introductions over at ASAE, but I can't help thinking now that CXPA needs to come up with some type of partnership with ASAE to be able to introduce more of its professionals to association leaders because it's just so necessary. I mean, I see it literally every day where that customer experience, member experience, whatever we want to call it, there's just breaks in the chain, and it would create much a heightened experience, leads to greater retention, leads to greater revenue and greater opportunity to invest, right? It's almost as simple as that. I'm oversimplifying a bit, but that is a key element I think that's missing in our industry.
Yeah, it's really well stated. And, I think that there are some pieces that have begun to come together. Definitely some of the work that is being done by Jessica Kinghorn, CCXP, who the work that's being done by Intellios over in Maryland, American Medical Association, AARP, AAA, the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association. There are a lot of leaders and folks that are out there that are getting involved and doing things. But what's interesting is that associations are in the same place that corporations are. Some people are early in the journey, some people are late in the journey, and we need to figure out how we help people get to the right place for where they are in that space and in that journey. But I'm pretty confident that, given the reception that we had at the ASA annual conference last year, and then programs that we've done for the Arizona Society and the South Carolina Society, and one that I think we'll do for the Mississippi Society later this year, that we'll continue to do a lot together with the association community. Because if you didn't, again, another tip for our leaders, for our listeners, as an association leader, you are a leader of leaders. And so it's your opportunity to help bring these uh, rising membership approaches and management approaches and ideas to the table. So whether that's in helping people understand AI or understand customer experience or understand certification or understand globalization, associations are critical to helping organizations develop new skills and grow and expand.
Yeah, absolutely. I have an appreciation certainly for those associations who have the 8 or 9 figure revenue amounts to be able to implement all of those great strategies. I think you'd agree the bulk of the need is in that next tier of those associations who are more closer to their infancy or are still looking to grow. That sort of that mid-market, if you will, in the associations that are trying to figure out how do we do all of that while wearing 8 to 12 hats per staff member and finding the budget,
Right.
to
But
bring in a CXPA member, for example, or somebody who's
yeah,
certified
but,
to
I mean,
consult in that area. I mean, there
yeah.
are consultants in the
Well, I
industry
mean, but
that do
I
that.
mean, it's easy enough. I mean, start small. When I think about it, when I talk about NPS, I still go back to Bill Burns, who was the CEO at the American Play Therapy Association before he retired. He used two questions on his annual meeting evaluation. The first was on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend the APTA conference? The second was, what do we need to do to score 1 point higher? Here we are as association executives sending out 20 question surveys or 20-page surveys. Those two questions just got to the heart of the matter. And so I think that was a great spot. I think there are really accessible platforms like PropFuel and Dave Will's team that
Yeah,
are
Dave's
helping
great.
people to understand and think about how they can bring pieces in. So don't think that you have to go out and be Amazon. I think that's one of the
Yeah,
mistakes that happens is people look at benchmarking and they think that they need to repeat what others have done. And the reality is you need to look at what others have done and then decide, well, what's right for my organization.
yeah, that's a great example. I'm glad you brought that up. Shout out to Dave, Propful. They do great work. And the two questions reminds me a lot. Maybe this is where Hermosi took it from, but his two famous questions, when he's in a sales perspective in the for-profit world are, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to go with us or buy our product? And they say, okay, it's a 6. And then his next question is, well, what would it take to be a 10? What are we missing between 6 and 10? Right. So it's a very similar concept in the sense
Yeah.
of close the deal, get better, and find out. Again, listen to where you are on the spectrum to begin with.
Yeah, I really like that.
Well, I want to switch gears again and just ask a couple of fun ones before we wrap us up, Greg, because I could chat with you all day, I think, but you got other things and better things going on. So one of the things that I typically ask our guests at the end is, what's something that goes on your calendar every year that you look forward to, that's written in pen before it's pencil, and I'm going to jump ahead because I've heard so much about Burns Night that I want to hear more. This is probably the thing. I'm just going to make the bold assumption that it is, but what is Burns Night?
Yeah, so Burns Night, for our Scottish fans, they'll know more than I do. It is the birthday of Robert Burns, who wrote Auld Lang Syne and many other poems. And so it's celebrated on, I think it's January 25th each year in Scotland, with a very formal dinner with haggis and whiskey tastings and poetry readings and a very structured the toast to the lasses, the toast to the laddies. We do a downscale version we have for the last 21 years. And where we do have a USDA friendly haggis.
Oh,
And my wife curates a poetry reading section, and I curate introductions to Scotch and whiskey. And so we usually have somewhere between 60 and 150 bottles of whiskey open for people
wow.
to taste. and,
It's
and
a
I just love
serious
talking.
tradition. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to talk about talking all day, I could just go through and tell you the difference, where I got the bottle, where what its meaning is. But what's most important to me, about Burns Night is really that opportunity for people to come together for community in a way that they might not otherwise have been connected, and to have that open space of experimentation, and so whether it's the first time that somebody's tasted whiskey or they want to read the lyrics to a Bay City Rollers song rather than doing a poem, shout out to Todd and Dawn on that one. We just enjoy the fact that people can come together from long-term friend backgrounds to connections through associations to connections through my wife's work in museums, and just have a ton of fun with that.
What was the original impetus? Like what drove you to go, you know what, we needed to do Burns Night 22 years ago before you started?
So I have a real soft spot in my heart for all things UK through my time that I spent there. And one of the things that happened for us was that somebody had hosted a 4th of July party for the Americans in London. And it was, they had a barbecue. It was not a very good barbecue, but it had meaning that us Americans could come
I
together.
understand that.
Yeah, I mean, American baked beans is nothing like British baked beans. Don't ever make that mistake. And so when we came back to the U.S., we started looking for opportunities to sort of pay it forward. And one of my staff assistants at the U.S. Chamber Institute program, Tom Grant, was Scottish. And so we decided we would throw him a Burns Night. And I think he probably describes that Burns Night about the way I just described the picnic, because our haggis came from a can. We had one bottle of scotch, and we had no idea what we were doing. But we've grown up, Tom. Come back and join us again.
You've leveled up 100x, it sounds like. Yeah. Humble beginnings to quite a tradition. That's a great story. I love that. Well, one last one before I wrap this up. Give us, maybe one highlight, a favorite memory from leading in the association industry. I know that's kind of a big question, and you've been in the market for a while. What stands out for you?
Yeah, I think what really stands out for me the most is when you get a chance to recognize that you have done something that's really helped somebody and move on and get to their next spot in their next space. And when I look back, I mean, there are a lot of things that I would go back and I would point to. But what I would share is that I was recently on a call with somebody that I wasn't sure that I had met before. And so I actually was giving them a little bit of background on myself, and they said, "Oh yeah, I know that you ran the CAE program at ASAE because I came and sat in your office when I was starting a certification program and asked you questions." I said, "Oh, okay, let me look at that and figure that out." And so I guess that's what I would say to people is just make sure that you take that opportunity to pay it forward and to always be willing to sort of share your knowledge and wisdom. Anyone who wants to learn more about customer experience or at Burns Night or anything else that I've said, I'd love to hear from you. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn's probably the easiest, to do, and always glad to have a conversation.
Hear, hear. Well said. Well, thanks again, Greg, for joining us, for sharing a bit of your story. And I'm personally intrigued about CXPA now and how, I think I'm ready for a CXPA member in our, but more to come on that. Before we final wrap, is there somebody in your network, Greg, that you think our audience would benefit from hearing from?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot. I've mentioned a couple of names, as I've moved forward and things, but I think somebody that I would recommend as a interesting person whose voice I think needs to be brought forward more in the association community is Vivian Abalama, IOMCAE. Vivian worked with me at ASAE, and many people know her through her work with young professionals committee. But what's really happened is she's gone on to work with a number of different medical societies later. At the same time, she's also figured out how, as a single mother, to raise her kids and her family and find balance in her life. And so I think there's a lot that she has to share with the community.
Not an easy task whatsoever. Well, thank you again, Greg. Appreciate the time, and look forward to our paths crossing in the future.